Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about gardening, botanical history, and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Eveling, and today is May 5th, and there are just 46 days until the first day of summer. Today we celebrate a British garden designer, prolific Edwardian landscape architect, and town planner. We'll also learn about another British garden designer who's remembered for his innovative gardens in Tuscany. We'll hear an excerpt about a fantastical garden that grew extremely well after going fallow for 3 years. And we grow that garden library today with one of the top books on flower gardening by a modern garden master. And then we'll wrap things up with the story of the Iowa State flower. But first, here's today's curated news. Today's curated news comes to us from Fine Gardening. This is a post that was written by Anne Stratton, and the title of the article is 2 Secrets to Great Garden Design. Care to make a guess as to what these 2 secrets are? Well, you don't have to wait too long. I'll tell you what they are. It's establishing layers in the garden and then creating patterns. Fine Gardening says those 2 concepts are the keys to crafting an informal garden. Now, I'm going to let you read about these for yourself, but I thought I'd give you a quick high level to pique your curiosity. With regard to establishing layers, Fine Gardening does a great job of outlining the 4 different layers that you should consider in your garden. First is the ground story. So what we're talking about here are your low-growing plants. And these are defined as plants that grow a foot tall or less. So that's your ground story. Then next is the upper story. And I love what they say here. The upper story is the link between the sky and the landscape. So that's a great way to think about the upper story. Now, the next term is the second upper story. This is where it can get confusing, but think about it this way. The second upper story connects the landscape to the house. And the tip that they offer here is that the taller your house, the taller that this tier needs to be. And so the general rule of thumb that they say to follow here is that if you have a 2-story home, you want to look for plants that will grow between 25 and 30 feet tall. And if you have a 1-story home, a ranch home, that will be between 8 and 15 feet tall. So those are great parameters for you to work with. And then I just want to read this one little paragraph to you because it contains so much good advice. It says, if you're starting a new garden, buy your trees and shrubs first. Use them to create a frame around your yard. Plant them in groups along your property line for privacy and in the corners of your lot to soften the angles. And then they point out that it doesn't take many of these types of plants to give your beds structure year-round and to create focal points in the garden. So if you're starting from scratch in your garden right now, don't spend your time worrying about the perennials and the flowers and the vegetables. You should be thinking about trees and shrubs that are going to make up your second upper story. Place these items in the corners of your house and place them in lines for privacy. Those are your 2 takeaways. And then finally, the last level that they say you should consider is the mid-story. This is where you marry the house to the garden. And this is where you're going to see your eye-level perennials and shrubs. And that is, of course, the majority of plants that you're going to see in your garden. And I love what they say here as well. They say this is where you're going to put your signature plants. You're going to put the wow factor, the plants that really draw your eye into the garden, lure people and entice people as they come onto your property. Then the next step that Fine Gardening points out here is that you want to create patterns. You want repetition in your garden because that is very pleasing to the eye. So a couple of tips that they offer here. And then, of course, there's tons of explanation. So I'm just giving you the high level. They say pick 3 colors and a texture. That's a good rule of thumb. Think triangles when you're placing things because triangulation is pleasing to the eye. So when you're positioning things, that's why gardeners are constantly talking about planting in odd numbers because that immediately gives you the triangulation that is the default when it comes to good design. And then they wrap this post up with a few little tips. They talk about pruning. They advise not cutting back in the fall so that you can be friendly to wildlife. In terms of fertilizing, they don't advise fertilizing every single plant in the spring. In this instance, the gardener that they're talking to sprinkles wood ash around her peonies to help intensify their color. So that's a great idea. If you haven't tried that yet, it might be something you want to consider. Then they encourage you to think about things like watering if you don't have an irrigation system. I myself have an irrigation system, and the older I get, the more appreciative I am of my irrigation system because it definitely makes gardening easier and less worrisome, especially if I'm on the move or if I'm not home. I don't have to worry so much. And last but not least, weeding. And I love what they say here because they say never stop weeding, not even in the winter. And isn't this so true? In fact, here in Minnesota, as winter is coming on, everything will be brown and dull and lifeless in the garden. And yet, if you do a walkthrough, those weeds are going to be as green as all get out, just daring winter to bring its worst. And so they're much easier to spot in the fall after everything has died back. But it's also a great time to go out and attack weeds, just like it is right now in the spring before they get established. So I think about the areas where I commonly have thistles. This is a time where I'm going to get very aggressive with those with the help of my student gardeners. The creeping Charlie is another great thing to try to get under control. And of course, anything else that you're doing battle with, you'll have to make it top of mind and be relentless as those weeds are in wanting to survive. They really definitely want to live. All right, well, that's it for today's curated news. Wasn't that a great topic? I thought so. Something very timely and also very thought-provoking for you as you get out into your gardens again. So if you would like to read this post in more detail, and there is tons of detail in this post, all you need to do is head on over to the Facebook group for the show. And when you're in the Facebook group, just head on up to the top right underneath the little header for the group. You'll see a little magnifying glass there, and you can search for the word design, and Anna's post will pop up. If you're not in the Facebook group, please know that you can always join the group. You have a standing invitation. It's completely free. It's a private group, so what you share in the group will stay in the group. And best of all, if you join the group, in addition to seeing all of the curated posts, you'll have a chance to share your garden with the listeners of the show. And who better to share your garden with, because we are all huge garden fans and this is our time of year. And I would especially enjoy seeing what you've got cooking in your own garden. So please feel free to join. Take some time this week and make that happen. It's very easy to do. The next time you're in Facebook, just remember to head on up to the search bar, type in the words Daily Gardener Community, and then request to join. It's that easy, and I can't wait to meet you in the group. It's time for today's botanical history. Here's botanical history for today, May 5th. Today is the birthday of the British garden designer, prolific Edwardian landscape architect, and town planner, Thomas Hayton Mawson, who was born in Lancashire on this day, May 5th, in 1861. When Thomas was a teenager, his dad started a nursery and a fruit farm in Yorkshire. Thomas loved the orchard, but his happiness came to an abrupt end when his father died and his mother was forced to sell the property. But the nursery experience had left an impression on Thomas and his siblings, and at one point, they all pursued work in horticulture. After the family moved to London, Thomas and his two brothers set up a nursery called Lakeland Nurseries. The business was a success, and it allowed Thomas to begin focusing on designing gardens, his zone of genius. In 1900, Thomas wrote his classic work, The Art and Craft of Garden Making, which is now considered foundational to modern landscape architecture. The book brought Thomas influence and authority, and as testimony to how popular it was reprinted 5 times. In short order, Thomas's firm, Thomas H. Mawson and Sons, became the firm for landscape architecture in England. Thomas's most famous client was William Hasketh Lever, an English industrialist, philanthropist, and politician. Thomas eventually designed many of William's properties: Thornton Manor, Lever's Cheshire home, Rivington Pike, and Lever's London home, The Hill, in Hampstead. Thomas is also remembered for designing England's first purpose-built mosque, the Fazl Mosque in Wandsworth. As his reputation grew, Thomas's work on public spaces expanded. He was even commissioned to develop the Smoky Mountains National Park in the United States. Thomas's most notable public work was commissioned by Andrew Carnegie. He designed the Gardens of the Peace Palace in The Hague in 1908. And today is the birthday of another British garden designer and architect. This one is known for his innovative gardens in Tuscany, Cecil Ross Pinsent, who was born on this day, May 5th, in 1884. Cecil worked with the American art historian Bernard Berenson on his iconic estate known as the Villa I Tatti. This relationship opened doors for Cecil, and he was soon designing gardens for the wealthy in Tuscany. In the 1930s, Cecil designed his masterpiece, the gardens at La Foce in Italy, midway between Florence and Rome. Tucked in 3,500 acres of farmland with scenes of the Tuscan landscape as a backdrop, La Foce was commissioned by the writer Marchesa Iris Origo. In 1924, Iris and her husband Antonio purchased the villa. It was old and run down, and Iris reached out to Cecil, a friend of the family, and she tasked him with creating a glorious garden. Knowing how Iris adored the gardens of Florence, Cecil set about creating the iconic structure of the garden, a series of intimate spaces lined with double box hedging, cypress, lawns, and meadows. And even today, the lush green garden of La Foce is even more striking against the background of the barren Tuscan topography. It's time for today's Unearthed Words. Today's unearthed words come to us from the American author of fantasy and children's books, Robin McKinley. This is from her book, Beauty, a retelling of the story of Beauty and the Beast. When spring came, I dug up the garden and planted it and weeded it and prayed over it and fidgeted. And almost 3 years of lying fallow had agreed with it because it produced radishes the size of onions, potatoes the size of melons, and melons the size of small sheep. The herb border ran wild, and the air smelled wonderful. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Mastering the Art of Flower Gardening by Matt Mattis. This book came out in 2020, and the subtitle is A Gardener's Guide to Growing Flowers, from Today's Favorites to Unusual Varieties. Well, I remember when this book came out because I already had a copy, and of course, at the time it was published on March 10th, many of us were in the middle of beginning our lockdowns for the pandemic. And so I remember thinking what a shame it was, because this book is not only beautiful, and man, I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous, but it's also so helpful. It's really a wonderful reference. Now, another reason that I knew this book would be so good is because Matt is such a true professional. And he has decades of experience with his own garden and his greenhouse. And you can read all about both of them over on his blog called Gardening with Plants. It really is a wonderful online resource. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure that you devote a little bit of time to that. And just know that I've included a link to it in today's show notes. Now, if you are someone who starts annuals from seed, you will really enjoy Matt's book. He talks about how to start over 100 different annuals from seed. He also talks about things like summer bulbs, so if that's something you're interested in. Also, vines, which is a favorite topic of mine because I not only love to use vines as a vertical element in the garden, but I also think they're wonderful just ambling through the garden as a horizontal element, almost like a ground cover. So that's fantastic. And then Matt talks about things like blooming shrubs, one of my favorite topics. You get so much bang for your buck with blooming shrubs. They give your garden structure, just like we talked about at the top of the show when we were talking about garden design. And they're just so low maintenance. They're wonderful. So blooming shrubs are one of my go-tos in the garden. Now, here's a little bit about what the publisher says about this book. You will learn little details and cultural facts about these flowers that will help you grow them. You'll find helpful tips for things like growing annual poppies and biennials, which can be a little bit challenging. You'll learn about forcing flowers for winter blooms, which is a very fun activity if you have not tried that. In fact, one of the things that Matt talks about is how to force lily of the valley. That is a fantastic topic, and I'm sure now that I've mentioned it, it's making you very curious. And if that doesn't do the trick, just trust me, this is a book that you're going to want to have in your botanical library. This book is 240 pages of a masterclass on flower gardening from a true master, Matt Mattis. Love the name and really love the book. You can get your own copy of Mastering the Art of Flower Gardening by Matt Mattis and support the show by using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $17. Great book. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day, May 5th, in 1897, that the Iowa state flower was officially selected, and the winner was the wild rose. In the early days of the state, Iowa pioneers often came across the wild rose as they settled on the Iowa prairie. And although the Iowa legislature designated the wild rose as their flower, they failed to specify which wild rose was official. In Iowa, there are 3 native wild roses: Rosa arkansana, Rosa blonda, and Rosa carolina. Of the 3, Rosa blonda, or the meadow rose, is most often regarded as the state flower, although all 3 can qualify. In 2006, a 5th grade student named Miranda Olson drew the state's wild rose with oil pastels, and her effort won her a trip to Washington, D.C., where her artwork was displayed at the new National Garden when it opened in the fall of that year. The Des Moines Register reported that more than 5,000 students nationwide had submitted artwork for the state flower contest. 1 student from each state was selected by a panel of art specialists and botanists. Miranda's art teacher, Karen Skophammer, had a gut feeling that Miranda might win, and so she took a photo of Miranda's drawing before sending it in to the contest. She said, "In my heart, I knew that it was outstanding. Miranda is quite talented." Miranda took a guess as to why she won, but she also acknowledged that she barely looked at the technical photo of the rose. She said, "I off-centered the flowers. Most other people put it right in the middle. I looked at the picture in the beginning, but not while I was drawing or coloring it." The contest was sponsored by Scott's Miracle-Gro, and company officials said that they were very pleased with the turnout. And there's just one more story that I wanted to share with you about the Iowa state flower, the wild rose. In 1897, a Major Samuel H.M. Byers from Oskaloosa, Iowa, had worked behind the scenes with Senator Mitchell to make sure the legislation for the wild rose was passed. Major Byers was remembered for his Civil War service. And while he was held prisoner in Columbia, South Carolina, he had written the words to the famous song, Sherman's March to the Sea. But in better times, Major Byers had also written a poem called Song of Iowa, and that poem became the lyrics to the Iowa State song, The Rose of Iowa. It goes like this. Hast thou seen the wild rose of the west, thou sweetest child of morn? Its feet the dewy fields have pressed, its breath is on the corn. The gladsome prairie rolls and sweeps like billows to the sea, while on its breast the red rose keeps the white rose company. The wild, wild rose, whose fragrance dear to every breeze is hung. The same wild rose that blossomed here when Iowa was young. O sons of heroes, ever wear the wild rose on your shield. No other flower is half so fair in love's immortal field. Let others sing of mountain snows or palms beside the sea. The state whose emblem is the rose is the fairest far to me. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced in lovely Maple Grove and Wyoming, Minnesota. If you want to read today's show notes, just head on over to thedailygardener.org. And while you're there, be sure to sign up for my free Friday newsletter. And don't forget that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. Just search for Daily Gardener Community the next time you're on Facebook and request to join. Last but not least, you can always get in touch by emailing me at jennifer@thedailygardener.org. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and as always, have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.